Hi, this is Elara Finch. If you're hearing this, it means someone finally found the recorder. I'm not sure how long it's been sitting on the table, gathering dust like everything else in this house. Days, weeks. Time has started to feel slippery, like a wet bar of soap you can't quite hold on to. It's funny, the things you think are solid, the things you believe you can count on. Time, silence, your own mind, they all start to bend in a place like this. I don't expect anyone to believe me. I need to say it out loud before the house swallows it whole. The words feel heavy in my mouth, like stones I've been carrying for too long. I have to get them out, to put them into the air, even if it's just the stale, dusty air of this living room. Maybe the sound waves will carry the truth out of here, past the overgrown garden and the creaking gate, and find someone who understands. I've already told the police. I sat in their cold, sterile office under the buzzing fluorescent lights and watched the officer's eyes glaze over as I spoke. He kept nodding and saying, "Ma'am," but he wasn't really listening. He was just waiting for me to finish so he could file his report and move on to the next person with a story that made more sense. He wrote down things like auditory phenomena and stress-induced anxiety. He suggested I get some rest, maybe see a doctor. He didn't hear the desperation in my voice. He just heard a lonely woman in a big, empty house. I've told my sister, the neighbors, even the guy from pest control who didn't want to come back after the first visit. My sister, Sarah, tried to be patient. She brought over a casserole that I didn't eat and told me I needed a hobby. "You've been through a lot, Elara," she said, her voice laced with that gentle pity I've come to despise. "It's normal to feel unsettled." She thinks the silence of the house is the problem, that I'm just not used to being alone after Mom passed and after Mark left. She doesn't understand that the silence is the most terrifying part, because it's never truly empty. The neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Gable, just smiled politely and backed away slowly when I tried to explain the noises. They've lived on this street for 40 years and have never heard a peep from this old house, they said. They probably think I'm the strange one, the new owner who talks to herself and jumps at shadows. And the pest control guy, he was a young man with a nervous energy. He walked through the house, tapping on walls and shining his flashlight into dark corners. He found nothing. No rats, no squirrels, not even a spider. But as he was leaving, he paused at the front door and looked back at me. "This house," he said, "it just feels wrong." He promised to call and schedule a follow-up, but he never did. I don't blame him. Some feelings are too strong to ignore. But nobody believed me. They all had their own explanations, their own neat little boxes to put my fear into. Stress, grief, loneliness, an overactive imagination. It was easier for them to believe I was broken than to believe the house was. Not until me. She was the only one who looked me in the eyes and said, "I believe you." Those 3 words were like a lifeline thrown into a churning sea. She didn't flinch, she didn't look away. She just listened, her gaze steady and unwavering. It was the first time I felt like I wasn't screaming into a void. And now, she's the reason I'm recording this. She's the reason there are roses blooming in October. Their crimson petals a stark, impossible splash of color against the dying autumn landscape. You hear that? That's the sound I used to wake up to every night. It's a patient sound, a persistent sound. It became the soundtrack to my fear. A dragging, soft and steady, like someone pulling a heavy burlap sack across the floorboards of the attic, right above my bed. The sound would start around 2 in the morning, a slow, rhythmic thump, moving from one end of the house to the other. It was a sound that didn't belong. It was too deliberate for an animal, too soft for a person. At first I thought it was mice, or the pipes settling in the cold. This old house has a whole orchestra of groans and creaks. I told myself it was nothing. I would bury my head under the pillows, humming a tune to drown it out, trying to convince myself that I was being silly, that every old house made noises. Then I started finding my things moved. A mug from the kitchen cabinet placed perfectly in the center of the living room floor. The hallway mirror tilted at a strange angle, always facing the front door as if watching for someone's arrival. My car keys buried in the soft soil of the garden bed. Little things, insignificant things on their own. But together, they started to feel like a message, a quiet, creeping campaign to unravel my sanity. Enough to make me doubt myself. Was I really that forgetful? Was the stress making me do things I didn't remember? I started leaving little notes for myself, reminders of where I'd put things, but it didn't help. The objects continued their silent migrations. Everyone said it was stress. After the divorce, after Mom died, I was fragile. I know that. The grief was a heavy blanket, smothering me. The house was supposed to be a new start, a place to heal. Instead, it felt like it was feeding on my sadness, growing stronger as I grew weaker. But I also know what I heard. I know the difference between the house settling and the sound of something being deliberately, slowly, dragged across the floor above my head. I know I didn't leave my mother's favorite teacup on the bottom step of the basement stairs. One night I woke to footsteps in the kitchen. They weren't heavy, not like a man's footsteps. They were light, almost hesitant, the sound of bare feet on cold linoleum. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. I called out, "Who's there?" And the steps stopped completely. The silence that followed was somehow louder and more terrifying than the footsteps themselves. It was a listening silence, an expectant silence. Then the refrigerator door opened. Slowly. I could hear the rubber seals stretch and groan in protest, a long, drawn-out sound that seemed to echo through the entire house. It was a sound I knew intimately, but hearing it in the dead of night, caused by an unseen hand, was terrifying. When I finally gathered the courage to go downstairs, clutching a heavy flashlight like a weapon, the light was off but the milk sat on the counter, warm and sweating in the moonlight. The carton was open, a small puddle forming around its base. Nothing else was touched. The chairs were all tucked in, the counters were clean. Just the milk. I know how that sounds. A carton of milk on a counter, it's nothing. But if you'd been there, if you felt the air, the stillness, the palpable sense of a presence that had just vanished, you'd know it wasn't a prank. It was a statement. I am here. I can touch your things. I can come into your space. It felt like a violation, a quiet act of intrusion that left me feeling more alone than ever. A few weeks later, I started seeing things in the corner of my eye. A shape thin, long, almost folded in half, like a broken doll or a forgotten shadow, standing by the basement door. It was never there when I turned to look directly at it, just a flicker, a brief impression of something tall and wrong. Never fully there, just enough to make me stop breathing, my lungs seizing in my chest. Every time I blinked, it felt closer. The first time, it was just a dark smudge in my peripheral vision. The next, I could almost make out a head, a shoulder. It never moved, it just was. A silent, patient sentinel guarding a door I was now too terrified to open. I told my sister, and she laughed. A short, sharp sound with no real humor in it, said maybe I needed to get out more. She suggested I join a book club or take a yoga class. "You're cooped up in that big house all day, Elara. It's playing tricks on your mind." But when I did go out, the feeling followed me. The feeling of being watched, of a shadow clinging to my heels. Like the shape had learned my rhythm, the way my shoes hit the pavement, the steady, thumping beat of my pulse. I would be in the grocery store, reaching for a carton of eggs, and a sudden chill would run down my spine. I would turn, expecting to see someone, but there was never anyone there. The feeling was like a cold spot in the air, a pocket of the house's oppressive atmosphere that had followed me out into the world. I started locking every door, even the inside ones. The bathroom door, the closet doors, the door to the empty spare bedroom. It was a useless, desperate gesture. I knew whatever was in the house with me wasn't bound by locks and keys. Didn't help. The dragging sound in the attic continued. The whispers in the walls grew louder. I was a prisoner in my own home, and my sanity was starting to fray at the edges. That's when I met me. We met at a grief support meeting in the basement of the local library. The room was drab and smelled of old paper and stale coffee. I had resisted going for weeks, but my sister had insisted. I sat in a hard plastic chair, my hands clenched in my lap, listening to other people's stories of loss. Their grief was a tangible thing in the room, a shared weight. She sat beside me the first night, quiet the whole hour. She had a stillness about her that was different from the tense silence of the others. It was a calm, centered quiet. When I finally spoke, my voice a raw, trembling thing, I mentioned the house, the noises, the feeling of not being alone. I saw everyone shift in their chairs, their gazes dropping to the floor, pretending not to roll their eyes. I was the crazy one, the one who was letting grief manifest in strange, unbelievable ways. But Me looked at me and nodded. Just a small, simple gesture, but it was everything. It was validation. It was belief. Afterward, she said, "It's not always the dead that haunt us." Her voice was low and calm, but her words sent a shiver down my spine. I remember those exact words. Because she didn't ask if I believed it. She said it like a fact, like a truth she had lived and understood. She had this calm about her, not soft exactly, but steady, like a deep, still pool of water. Her eyes were the color of a stormy sky, and they seemed to see right through me, to the fear I was trying so hard to hide. She said she lived a few streets over, in a place her aunt left her. She'd lost her husband last year. She spoke of him with a quiet sadness, but without the raw, ragged edges of my own grief. She seemed to have found a way to live with her loss, to carry it without letting it consume her. We started meeting for coffee, then dinners. I found myself telling her everything, the words pouring out of me in a torrent. I told her about the dragging, the milk, the shape by the basement door. She listened without judgment, her gaze never wavering. And soon she was spending nights here because, she said, no one should face that kind of fear alone. The first time she suggested it, I was hesitant. I didn't want to bring anyone else into the house's suffocating embrace. But a part of me was so desperate for an ally, for someone to witness what I was experiencing, that I agreed. The first night she stayed, the house was silent. No dragging, no footsteps, no whispers. The silence was different, too. It was a peaceful, empty silence. The oppressive weight I had grown so used to was gone. She said she'd talk to it. She had stood at the bottom of the stairs, her hand resting on the newel post, and had spoken in a low, even voice to the empty air. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was conversational, almost gentle. When I asked what that meant, she just smiled and said, "You don't confront a thing like that. You acknowledge it. You let it know you see it. Sometimes that's all it wants." For 2 weeks it worked. The house was calm. We cooked together, filling the kitchen with the warm smells of garlic and herbs. We repainted the kitchen a cheerful, sunny yellow. We planted a small garden in the backyard. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. I felt like I was reclaiming my home, my life. I slept through the night for the first time in months. Deep, dreamless sleep. I had almost convinced myself that it was over, that Me's presence had been enough to banish whatever had taken root in the house. But then the basement door started opening again. Always around 3 a.m., I would wake up to the soft click of the latch, followed by the slow, deliberate creak of the old wooden door swinging open on its rusty hinges. Me didn't seem scared. She would get out of bed, her face calm in the moonlight, stand at the top of the stairs, and whisper something I couldn't catch. The words were a soft, sibilant murmur, lost in the shadows of the hallway. Then she'd come back, her hands cold as glass, and say, "It's getting impatient." Impatient, like it was a petulant child or a hungry animal. Like it was waiting for something, and I was terrified to find out what that something was. I remember the night we decided to end it. The air in the house had grown thick and heavy again. The feeling of being watched was constant. The shape by the basement door was more defined, more solid. I had started to see it even when I wasn't looking out of the corner of my eye. Me said we had to seal it where it began, in the basement. She believed the house wasn't haunted in the traditional sense. It was hungry. It fed on fear, on grief, on loneliness, and it had been feeding on me for months. She brought candles, a jar of salt, and a small metal cross, even though she said she didn't believe in God. "Symbols have the power we give them," she explained, her voice calm and steady, a stark contrast to the frantic beating of my own heart. We went down into the basement just after midnight. The air was cold and damp. It smelled of earth and mildew and something else, something faintly sweet and cloying. She told me to close my eyes, to focus on my breathing, to try and find a calm, quiet place in my mind. I heard her whispering words that sounded like names. Old names, names I didn't recognize. Her voice rose and fell in a strange, hypnotic rhythm. I could feel the energy in the room shift, the air growing colder, tighter. Then a slam. The basement door, which we had left open at the top of the stairs, slammed shut with a deafening boom that echoed through the small, dark space. The candles went out, all of them all at once, as if a giant hand had snuffed them out. I heard her scream, a sharp, terrified sound that was cut off abruptly. And then, when the light came back from my phone screen, flickering and weak, she was on the floor, her face turned away. The small metal cross was lying a few feet away from her, bent and twisted as if by some incredible force. There was blood, a dark pool spreading out from under her, soaking into the dusty concrete floor. I remember holding the shovel. It was an old, rusty thing that had been leaning against the wall. Its weight felt strange and unfamiliar in my hands. I don't remember picking it up. My mind is a blank, a black hole where that memory should be. I didn't mean to. God, I didn't mean to, I swear. It was dark, and the air, it felt thick, like the room itself was pushing against me, squeezing the breath from my lungs. There was a presence in the room, something ancient and malevolent. I could feel its hatred, its hunger. She said something before she stopped breathing. Her voice was a faint, gurgling whisper. I think she said, "Now it's yours." Or maybe, "Now you're sure." I don't know anymore. The words are jumbled in my memory, twisted and distorted by fear and panic. I panicked. I couldn't call anyone. Who would believe me? That a shadow in my basement made me kill the only person who had tried to help me. They would lock me away. They would say I was insane. So I did the only thing that made sense at the time. The only thing the house seemed to want me to do. I buried her. Out back, under the rose bushes we had planted together. It was still raining then, the ground soft and forgiving enough to dig. I dug for hours, my muscles screaming in protest, the cold rain plastering my hair to my face. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd explain later, once I understood what had happened, once I could make sense of the impossible. But the next morning, the hole was perfect, the earth smoothed over, like it had never been touched. And the roses. They'd bloomed overnight, deep, blood-red roses, their petals unfurling in the pale morning light. Since then, the house has been quiet again. Almost peaceful, the dragging has stopped, the whispers have faded through. Sometimes I hear her voice in the kitchen, humming the song she used to hum when she cooked. A simple, sweet melody that now sounds like a funeral dirge. Sometimes I smell her perfume, a faint scent of lavender and vanilla hanging in the air. And sometimes, late at night, I see her silhouette by the garden, standing among the roses, staring up at my window. She doesn't move, she doesn't fade. Just stands there, watching, waiting. I want to believe it's guilt. That I'm hearing what I deserve to hear. That I'm seeing what I deserve to see. A ghost born from my own grief and remorse. But every time I try to dig, the soil resists me. Like hands, strong and cold, are pressing back from below. The ground that was so soft and yielding before is now as hard as stone. That's all for tonight. If anyone finds this, please, don't touch the roses. They're still listening. They still believe me. I thought one tape would be enough, a single, desperate message in a bottle. But I keep hearing her name in the static when I play it back. A faint, ethereal whisper woven into the hiss of the tape. Me. So I guess I'm still talking. To myself, to the house, to her. It's been 4 days, maybe 5. The sun rises and sets, but the time in between feels like a dream, a long, gray smudge. I tried to go back to work, stood in the parking lot, my hand on the cold metal of the car door, watched everyone else unlock their cars, their faces set with the grim determination of a Monday morning, and couldn't make myself open my door. The house keeps calling me back. It's a physical pull, a magnetic force that I can't resist. The first night after everything, I slept almost normally. A deep, heavy sleep born of exhaustion and shock. Then I woke at 3:02. I didn't know what woke me, but my eyes snapped open, and the first thing I saw was the clock. The clock blinked the time, red as a heartbeat. Downstairs, the refrigerator door creaked open again. The sound was so familiar, so horribly normal, that for a moment I thought me was in the kitchen making a late-night snack. Then memory came crashing back, cold and brutal. When I got there, my heart pounding in my ears, the light was on, but the milk was gone. Only an empty glass sat on the counter, half full of something cloudy, almost iridescent in the pale moonlight. Condensation ran down the sides like tears. I poured it out. The liquid was thick like nectar. It smelled like roses, a heavy, cloying sweetness that filled the kitchen and made me gag. I know what you're thinking. Grief makes people see patterns. Grief makes the world feel strange and hostile. But grief doesn't plant new rosebuds overnight or hum in your ear while you shower. Grief doesn't leave cryptic messages in the steam on your bathroom mirror. Last night, the humming started again, soft, right behind me as I stood under the hot spray of the shower. The same tune me used to hum while she cooked. A simple, looping melody that used to bring me comfort, but now fills me with a cold, creeping dread. When I turned, steam covered the mirror, and 3 words were written in the fog, as if by an invisible finger. I believe you. I should have been terrified. I should have screamed. Instead, I laughed, a strange, choked sound that was half sob, half laugh. Because for the first time since I met her, I wasn't alone. The proof was right there, written in the steam. It was a confirmation, a validation, and in a twisted, horrible way, it was a comfort. I went outside this morning. The roses were taller, almost chest-high now. They had grown impossibly fast, unnaturally fast. Their stems twist around each other like braids, thick and thorny. The blooms are the color of dried blood. When the wind moves through them, it sounds like whispering. Sibilant, secret whispers that I can't quite understand. I told myself I'd trim them, that I needed to take back control of my garden, of my home. But every time I reach for the shears, the air thickens, heavy and damp, and my hands go weak. It feels like a desecration. Like I would be hurting someone. Across the fence, my neighbor Mrs. Haynes was out in her own garden, tending to her petunias. She asked if I'd been feeding the plants fertilizer. "Miracle Grow," she'd chirped, her voice bright and cheerful. I told her no. She said there, the most alive thing she's seen in years. Her eyes lingered on them, a strange mix of admiration and unease in her gaze. I wanted to tell her what was under them. I wanted to scream, "There's a body under there, help me." But the words got stuck in my throat, tangled in a thick web of fear and shame. The nights are the hardest. The silence feels crowded. It's a silence that is filled with unseen things, with unheard whispers. Sometimes I hear a second heartbeat in the walls, a slow, steady thump-thump that is not my own. Sometimes I feel a breath against my neck, cold and damp, when I know I'm alone in a room. Sometimes I swear there's another voice on the recordings, just beneath mine, a ghostly harmony, like me's whispering along with every word. I replayed the part where I said her name. I must have listened to it a dozen times, my ear pressed against the small speaker of the recorder. There's a faint echo afterward that sounds like laughter. Not mocking, almost kind, gentle. Like she's glad I'm still talking to her, like we're sharing a secret. I've stopped going out. Groceries get delivered. I leave the bags by the door until the driver's gone, watching from behind the curtains until their car has disappeared down the street. The delivery people always comment on the roses. One of them said they looked almost human. He laughed after he said it, a nervous, uncertain laugh. The way they all seem to be facing the house, you know. I didn't ask what he meant. I knew exactly what he meant. The other night, a neighbor's dog, a friendly golden retriever named Buddy, wandered into the yard. It sniffed around the garden and started growling at the soil beneath the rose bush, its body low to the ground, the fur on its back raised. Then it yelped, A sharp, terrified sound and ran, its tail tucked between its legs. Next morning, there were paw prints in the mud, deep ones leading toward the bush, but none leading back out. It was as if the dog had simply vanished into thin air at the edge of the rose bush. I haven't seen Buddy since. Someone's upstairs. I can hear slow steps, heel then toe, packing back and forth in the spare bedroom, the room that me used to stay in. I don't have the strength to check. My body feels heavy, my limbs filled with lead. Every time I open that door, the smell of roses follows me, a cloying, suffocating perfume that clings to my clothes and my hair. Maybe it's her. Maybe she's just walking the house, making sure I'm still keeping her secret. Maybe she's reminding me, we did this together, we're partners in this. I tried to find her name online. Me with an E. Hennings, that's what she said. But there's no record. No obituary for her husband, no address, no social media profiles, nothing. It's like she never existed before the night we met at the grief support group. It's as if she was conjured out of my own desperation and loneliness. So who did I bury? What did I bury? I looked at the spot again this afternoon. I stood at the kitchen window, staring at the rose bush. The soil isn't flat anymore. It's swelling, mounded up, like something beneath it is pushing up, trying to get out. I pressed my ear to the ground. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure I wouldn't be able to hear anything else. But then I heard it. There's a sound, faint but steady. A heartbeat, slow and strong, coming from deep within the earth. Or maybe it's mine, echoing back through the dirt, a trick of the mind. Either way, she's not gone. She's more a part of this house than I am.